Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
Hey, it's our literature unit, and we're on day 2 of our novel called The Midnight Library, where the protagonist or the lead character, Nora Seed, finds herself, after having committed suicide, which is awful, finds herself in this world that's actually a library. And she's given the opportunity to make different choices in her life and to see if she might be happier with choices that she didn't make before. You know, all of us go through life and we think, well, you know, if I just done this, or if I said yes to this or no to this, would life be better now? Would I be happier? I don't think it's very wise sometimes to look back at the past and focus on that. Just deal with the present, which you can actually influence and change, and that will affect your future. But you can't go back and change things. And sometimes that really it actually leads to depressions a lot of times for people. So be careful with that. But I do think it's interesting that this author thought, hey, what if we could go back and change things? Would we be happier? Everybody looks at everybody else and thinks, oh, their life is so easy. They must be so happy. Never assume that. You never know what's going on in someone else's life. And that's what we're going to learn here with Nora.
I certainly think my life could be better than it is now, but I have no idea how to change things in the past. I don't know what sort of decisions were right and which ones were wrong. So more or less, I have to accept my current situation and be content about it.
Sure.
But in any case, we were introduced to someone in this novel who is, I guess, could be described as a failure in a sense.
Well, she calls herself a failure for sure.
Right. Most other people would probably think she's fairly normal, but of course, she had a bad childhood. Her parents got divorced. She quit swimming. She quit music. She ended up working in a music store. And then later her cat died and she decided not to go with her friend to Australia. And she just thought that she was a very insignificant person. She thought she should not go on living. So she took her own life. She committed suicide. But hey, her journey does not end in death. Of course, lots of people believe in different things about death. Some people think that when you die, well, you're just dead. Some people think that you go on to the afterlife, which could be going to heaven or hell or reincarnating or whatever. And as the Catholics believe, I think you could go to purgatory or something like that. I'm not Catholic, so I don't quite know how that works.
That's what they call hell. Yeah. So we're just going to pretend that we don't know about any of that stuff. We're going to live in this fantasy world of our author, Matt Haig. We're going to talk about him in our next program. But for now, today we're going to focus on what that midnight library life was like. So remember, Nora has committed suicide. At this point, she's in this in-between world or realm between life and death, and she's going to see if she actually can go back and make different choices if she would do it. Let's go ahead and read through day 2, guys, and then we'll be back.
The Midnight Library exists in a transitional space between life and death, with the clock frozen at midnight. It's filled with infinite books, each containing a different version of Nora's life based on choices she might have made. Nora is offered the opportunity to explore these alternative lives. If satisfied, she can live out that life until her natural death. If not, she automatically returns to the library. However, each life can be entered just once. Failure to find a desirable life could lead to her actual death, along with the library's destruction. After accustoming herself to this surreal setting, Nora ventures into the unchosen paths. In one, she's an Olympic swimming champion and doesn't disappoint her father. However, she finds herself seeing a psychologist and taking antidepressant medication. In another life, she exploits her musical talent, becoming a rock star and performing concerts with her band. This journey ends abruptly when she discovers that Joe had already died due to drug abuse. After numerous attempts, Nora lands in what seems to be the ideal life. Here, she's a cherished wife and mother and passionately pursues her philosophical career. Despite her alternative choices, she maintains a close relationship with Joe and Izzy. This life seems perfect on the surface, but it leaves Nora wrestling with a question. Does this life truly belong to her? Even though she is drawn to this version of her life, she finds herself back in the midnight library. As she returns, she observes the library beginning to fall apart and the hands of the clock starting to move. Okay, everybody, let's dive into our lesson and explain things for you. Again, we're talking about the Midnight Library, and we're talking about alternative lives in pages, which we're getting to right now. Remember where we left off? Nora had just died as a result of suicide, and she has gone to this realm or this period of existence, this place, this realm of existence between life and death.
Yeah.
And we're also describing it as a transitional space. The Midnight Library exists in a transitional space between life and death, with the clock frozen at midnight. So here we're describing this as transitional, which means you're going from one thing to another. So, for example, maybe you've been working at a trading company for 10 years and you decided to quit. And everybody asks you, well, what's your next job? Do you got another job lined up? No, I'm just going to go home and rest for a little while. I'm in a transitional period. I'm going to sort of, rest for a while and figure out what my next move is going to be.
Yeah, so that's the process of just changing from one condition or situation to another. So she's actually in this place called the Midnight Library that is described here as being a transitional space between life and death, with the clock frozen at midnight. So there's no time in the Midnight Library. It's filled with infinite books. Infinite just means without limit. Infinite, it goes forever and ever and ever. It could be limitless space, size, anything. Here, it's filled with infinite books. It's got so many books you can't count. The opposite of that, of course, is finite. And it's weird that we pronounce these differently, Tom. You know, infinite. But why do we say finite? Sorry, that's how weird English is. Finite just means it is limited. There's a limit to the number or scope or size of something. Here we've got so many books we can't count them. And each book contains a different version of Nora's life based on choices she might have made. Not the choices she actually made, but the choices she didn't make, or maybe just didn't have that opportunity as far as she could see. So a version of something, we use this word a lot. It just means a different type of something. So we use version to talk about software. Maybe you have a trial that you're listening to different witnesses, and they all saw the same thing, but they have different versions of what they saw, different types of something. So it's a form that differs in certain respects from others. So all these books have a different version of Nora's life based on or depending on what choices she might have made, not the choices she did make.
Right, so when you make a decision, of course, your life will fork off in a different direction. It's kind of like a tree, and you just don't know which branch or which leaf you're going to end up at. But here, the books are infinite, and of course, they all have different versions of her life. Based on those choices, Nora is offered the opportunity to explore these alternative lives. So I guess she can pick up a book and read it and live the life in that book for a while. And if satisfied, she can live out that life until her natural death. So, of course, she starts reading the book, and then she realizes, this sounds pretty good. I think I'll stick with this. But eventually, maybe she's reading on, and she finally decides, this life isn't really as good as I thought it's going to be. So I'll go back to the library and pick out another book. So, yes, indeed, if she gives up on one of those lives, she automatically returns to the library, and she has to start all over again.
So, yeah, this is kind of an interesting idea. However, it says each life can be entered just once. So once you pick up that book and you start living that life and you decide, I don't know, maybe I'll try something else. You can never go back to that same book and pick it up and keep going. So it's kind of an interesting idea because she's still kind of having to make some choices as she's reading or living this life. I'm sure it's like she actually pops into that life. They are trying to make a movie of this, by the way. I just read that the book was optioned off to a company, which just means a production company, a film company bought the rights to make this movie. So anyway, you can only pick that book up once. When she puts it back, she can no longer make that choice again. Failure to find a desirable life, one that she actually wants to choose, could lead to her actual death. So she, at some point, has to make a choice. If she doesn't, she's going to have to just move on, which, she's already dead, so she'll move on from there, along with the library's destruction. So if she doesn't make a choice, her library is also destroyed at the same time. What does destruction mean, Tom?
Well, when something is destroyed, when it is completely broken apart, it is completely damaged, and you can't use that thing again. We could talk about the destruction of Nagasaki or of Hiroshima after the bombs were dropped on those cities. They were destroyed by the bomb. So to destroy is the verb, and destruction refers to what happened after something was destroyed, or the process of destroying something. That's destruction. And yes, indeed, I suppose the books are titled or entitled with something that says, here's what your life would have been like if you had kept swimming, or here's what your life would have been like if you had kept your band going. And of course, there are infinite choices we make in life, so she can pick them out. But hey, she can't take forever. She's got to find a desirable life. And eventually, if she does not make a decision, she could actually die forever, and the library would be destroyed.
Yeah, because the library, remember, is only filled with books that are related to Nora's life, not anybody else's. Okay, guys, we're going to take a quick break, listen to our Chinese teacher, and then we'll be back to continue talking about the plot.
听众朋友大家好，我是安娜。我们昨天带大家开始看这个 The Midnight Library 午夜图书馆这个故事。然后女主角呢就是 Nora 35岁，做了一些不对的决定，然后又一直后悔，包括放弃了会游泳的这个梦想啊，然后放弃了音乐这条道路，然后呢跟这个订婚的 Dan 后来又解除婚约。本来要跟他的最好朋友 Easy 一起到澳洲重新过生活，可是后来又没有去，然后呢就过着觉得好像很微小的生活，养的猫又死了，然后钢琴家教也不上了，他准备结束自己的生命，可是他就进入了午夜图书馆的神奇的领域哦。我们来看一下今天这个图书馆到底是什么东西。这个午夜图书馆其实它就存在在生跟死之间的一个过渡空间。在第一段的第一句，这个所谓过渡空间的过渡，这个 transitional 就是可能左边是生，右边是死哦。在这样子的一个 space 当中，时间就定格在 midnight 就是半夜12点整的这个时候啦。好，那这个图书馆里面有很多书，而且每一本书都包含了 Nora 她不同生命可能做出的选择产生的不同的人生版本。我们在第一段第二句这边要特别小心一下哦，这里其实是一个 and 的省略的分词构句，不晓得你有没有注意到，在逗点前面有It is filled with 图书馆充满着很多书，但是逗点之后的 each 指的是 each book 每一本书。每一本书你有没有注意到后面的 contain 变成加 ing 的 containing 呢？因为在逗点之后的 and 省略掉了，而每一本书都包含有不同的 version 不同的版本。什么版本啊？我们后面看一下 Nora's life Nora 生活的版本。什么生活呢？后面的 based 可以左右括号一直到句尾的地方，这里有一个关系子句哦，省略的是 which 或者是 that 跟 is。 可是后面因为这个有一个大包小的关系子句，还有一个小关系子句在里面，先行词是 choices，后面的 she 到句尾一样左右括号，但是 she 的前面就少掉了 which 或者是 that， 因为在这里的 which that 是作为 have made 的受词，所以当关代是受词的时候，它就可以被省略掉。 好，所以这句话感觉有点复杂。总而言之呢 Nora 就是被给予了探索这一些替代人生的机会，而且如果她满意的话，她就可以过完那个人生，一直到自然死亡。如果她不满意的话，她就回到图书馆。只不过每一种人生，每一本书，她只能够进入一次。如果没有办法找到理想生活的话，可能她真的就会死掉哦，这个图书馆也就会毁灭掉。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. We're talking about the Midnight Library, alternative lives and pages, especially alternative lives for Miss Nora Seed. We talked about the Midnight Library actually being this space between life and death. Remember at the end of day 1, our program, we talked about how she committed suicide. She just felt like, oh, I don't matter.Who cares? My whole life is sad. I feel isolated. I'm just going to end it all. And sadly, that's what she did. But she ends up in this place, not heaven or hell. She ends up in this place called the Midnight Library. And this place is just stocked full of books. It's got books all over the place, so many that you can't even count them. And each book contains a different version of Nora's life.Based on choices that she might have made but didn't make. So she's offered the opportunity to explore these alternative lives. So she picks up a book and starts reading it and kind of pops into that life. If she likes it, then she can stay until she dies a natural death, meaning she doesn't kill herself and no one else kills her. She just dies because of probably old age. Or...If she doesn't like where the book's going or isn't quite sold on it, she puts the book back and picks up another book. But there is a time limit, supposedly. If she doesn't find a desirable life, then what happens is she just skips ahead and she does have to kind of have that acceptance of her actual suicide. And at that point, the library is destroyed.Indeed.
I should mention this. I'm not sure if it has anything to do with it, but this does remind me of an old Frank Capra movie called It's a Wonderful Life, and the main character does get to see what would happen if he weren't in the world, so it's kind of similar. But in any case here, yes, indeed, she's in this library. It's an unusual situation, so she needs to get used to it. And if you get used to something, we say you get accustomed to something, or you could say to accustom yourself to something. Sometimes, of course, when you go to a movie and you arrive a little late and you walk in the dark room, it takes a little time for your eyes to accustom themselves to the darkness, to get used to the darkness, to adjust to the darkness. So here she's going to adjust herself. She's going to accustom herself to this surreal setting. Surreal means it's not like real life, okay? It's kind of weird. It's like in science fiction.And Nora ventures into the unchosen paths. Remember, she gets to read these different books. And, of course, she ventures into them. She journeys into them. And, of course, your path is the road you're taking. And these are unchosen paths, which means those are the paths in her life that she did not choose.
Right. I wanted to mention paths is one of those weird plural forms. You can say paths with an S or paths with a Z. If paths is in front of another, especially a word that starts with a vowel, I recommend using the Z. It's easier to do. And paths and chosen paths, yes. And then there's another part where there's paths, and it's actually easier to do the Z sound. So, yeah, look at that. It's kind of an interesting English weirdness about pronunciation.
Oh, this word must be a nightmare for our dear students.
Sorry, guys.
It's got the th sound and it's got the z sound.
Together.
So you got to put them together. Paths. That's even hard for native speakers.
Now, here it says she ventures into the unchosen paths. If you venture into something, what they're saying is you're daring to do something that could be risky, maybe dangerous. You don't know what's going to happen to you. A business venture or venture capital is money that groups will lend to entrepreneurs to start a new business that it's a risk. You don't know if it's going to succeed. So here she's venturing into these different paths. In one, she's an Olympic swimming champion. Remember, she was a swimming champ and she gave up on it, disappointing her dad. Well, here she's already become an Olympic swimming champion, which takes a lot of work, and doesn't disappoint her father. However, it says she finds herself seeing a psychologist and taking antidepressant medication. So sounds like she's not happy with that choice. Her dad's happy, but you know what? Ultimately, you need to be happy, not just your parents. And I love my parents, but you have to yourself be happy with choices you're making. If you see a psychologist, you're seeing a type of doctor who deals with your mind. And a psychologist is an expert in psychology or study of the mind. And if you take an antidepressant, it's a type of drug or medicine that is supposed to help you with your depression. Although lately they've been finding that isn't the case, so be careful with that.
This sounds kind of similar to the case of Naomi Osaka, who dropped out of tennis because she couldn't take the pressure. So this does happen to people sometimes. People don't like fame so much. There's a lot of pressure. So yeah, she dropped out of swimming in her real life, and in this life she actually became an Olympic swimming champion, but she was still having difficulty with it, so she had to see a psychologist. And sometimes when you do that, they'll give you antidepressant or antidepressant medication. Medication is just some kind of medicine that you take. For example, if you have diabetes, you might take medication, you might take metformin or have insulin shots or whatever. Those would be examples of medication.
Yeah, but you know what? Before you start taking medicine to cover up symptoms, you should probably ask yourself, why am I depressed? A lot of times we go to doctors and they just want to hand us drugs. Find out what's going on. So yeah, what is it that's making you so unhappy? And try to get that worked out. In another life, so this is another book she's pulled off the shelf. She exploits her musical talent. Now, exploit can be used in a positive and a negative way. Here it's positive. If it's positive, it just means you take full advantage of something. You take advantage of some sort of opportunity that's been handed to you or that you can see in front of you. You don't want to waste that opportunity. Here she exploits her musical talent. She takes advantage of her talent. Remember, she can play the piano. And she becomes a rock star in this particular life. And she's performing concerts with her band. Does this make her happy, Tom?
No, it doesn't, because it says here, this journey ends abruptly, which means suddenly and unexpectedly, when she discovers that Joe, her brother, had already died due to a drug overdose or to drug abuse. Abuse means you're using something in a way you're not supposed to. We talk about child abuse or spousal abuse. Child abuse is when you treat children badly and you're not supposed to. And, wife abuse or husband abuse, you're treating your spouse like an animal, you're beating them and stuff like that. So, yes, indeed, she had this problem. Or he had this problem, and that could happen if you're a rock star. Lots of rock stars go on drugs and they die early. And after numerous attempts or many tries, Nora lands in what seems to be the ideal life. Here she is cherished, or she is a cherished wife and mother, and passionately pursues her philosophical career. So if you pursue something, you go after it, especially if you're talking about pursuing a woman, for example. If you're a man and you're interested in her, you can pursue her, you can chase her. But here, you can pursue your career, by going to university and getting the right jobs. And in this particular case, it's a philosophical career. I guess she wants to be a philosopher.
Yeah. Philosophical just applies to philosophy or why we're alive. What's the purpose of life? What are we here to learn and to become? So she is now passionately or doing something with a lot of excitement and love. She's pursuing a philosophical career. Despite her alternative choices, she maintains a close relationship with Joe and Izzy. So this is good. She's maintained her relationships with people who, are important in her life, her brother and her best friend. This life seems perfect on the surface, but it leaves Nora wrestling with a question. If you wrestle with something, you kind of struggle with it. And this is the question, does this life truly belong to her? Hey, is this the life that I really should be choosing? Does it belong to me? So even though she's drawn to this version of her life, she finds herself back in the midnight library. Ooh. As she returns, she observes the library beginning to fall apart and the hands of the clock starting to move. So what do you think, Tom?
We don't really know, and that's why we're going to leave it there because we don't want to spoil the ending for you. We want you to actually read this book yourself and find out what happens. And we do know the ending, but that's for us to know and you to find out. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Here comes our Chinese teacher.
所以啊 Nora 就花了一些时间先适应一下这种超现实的环境。那之后适应了，他就开始冒险探索没有选择的道路。在其中一个人生当中，他当然就先从游泳冠军游泳开始。那他当时呢就是一个奥运的游泳冠军哦，然后他的父亲当然就是很满意啊，没有让他失望。可是他自己却非常的不开心，因为我们昨天提到，就是因为他的压力很大，所以他放弃了游泳。后来在这个人生当中，他发现他自己在看心理医师，而且还服用抗忧郁的药物。好，另外一件事情就是有关于音乐了，所以在第二段第4句，我们来注意一下，这里也有一个分词构句哦。它的分词构句其实也是 and 的省略。好，那我们再看一下，这句提到的是在另外一个人生当中有关于音乐的哦，他就发挥了自己音乐的天赋，成为摇滚巨星。好，我们在第4句这个地方看到的第一个动词是 exploits， 就是所谓的发挥。逗点之后，他因为发挥了他的音乐天赋，然后就成为发挥了之后就成为，其实他几乎是同时也可以算是接连发生的动作。发挥天赋，然后就成为 rock star， 所以逗点之后本来有一个 and 就直接省略掉，让 becomes 变成 becoming， 这样动作就会有个流畅几乎同时发生的感觉。好，那当然在这里的分词构句除了第2个动作 becomes 变成 becoming 之外，后面还有一个动作哦，那个动作就是所谓的 performs concerts， 就是开演唱会啦。那在这里 performing 的 and 是用来连接前面的 becoming 跟 performing 这2个动词 ing。 好，那当然这个生活感觉还蛮好的啊，发挥了音乐的才能啊，可是他为什么不好呢？因为在第2段第5句提到，后来他发现他哥哥 Joe 因为 drug abuse 出现在第5句最后面。 drug abuse 就是药物滥用的意思，可能是吸毒啦，或者是药物过度啊。后来他哥哥居然因此而过世，所以他就不选择这样的人生。不过经过了很多尝试， Nora 终于进入了一个好像看起来他还蛮理想的人生哦。在这个人生里面，他是什么样的角色呢？在第3段第2句这个地方，我们看到一个形容词叫做 cherished。cherish 本来是珍惜的意思，在这里用被动式的 PP 指的是被珍惜的，所以她是一个被珍惜的太太，被珍惜的妈妈，也就是受宠爱的妻子，还有母亲。但是她不是只有当妈妈当妻子哦，她还热情的追求她自己的一个哲学事业。所以虽然她做出了不同的选择，但是她跟 Joe 哥哥还有好朋友 Easy 都保持了一个非常亲密的关系，距离接近亲密的。在第3段第3句这里我们还是看到 close 这个形容词。好，那这个人生看起来好像蛮完美的，不过他就一直在想一个问题，就是这真的是属于我的人生吗？第3段的第4句，我们先看到动词的 leave， 在这里不是离开哦，而是使某人在某一种状态当中，所以这个状态有可能是动词 ing 或者是 pp， 所以我们会说 leave 加受词补语。这个补语看到的 wrestling with a question 就表示思索这个问题。对啊，这种生活真的是他的生活吗？ 好，看到最后一段，故事几乎结尾咯。虽然他被这个版本的生活吸引，但是他发现他后来还是回到午夜图书馆。可是当他回去的时候，图书馆居然开始崩塌耶，而且时钟居然开始转动了。好，到底结局是如何呢？我们当然不能告诉你，因为就像电影也不能告诉你结局一样啊。可是我们明天还是会继续讨论一下午夜图书馆到底有关于哪一些主题。我们如果看这本书的话，可以想什么样的事情呢？我是安娜，我们明天见。
That's all for today, everybody. Please join us again next time when we talk some more about the Midnight Library, Alternative Lives and Pages. We look forward to seeing you then. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.